Forestrike is the rare game that lets you see the future and still absolutely bodies you for getting cocky. You can rehearse every punch, every dodge, every weapon swap as much as you want. And then the moment it actually counts, one mistimed input turns your perfect kung fu ballet into a faceplant on the pavement. The question is whether that feeling is addictive genius or a fancy way to waste 30 minutes at a time. You play as you, a martial artist gifted with foresight, wandering a war-torn country to free it from an admiral and save the emperor. On the surface, it looks like a chunky pixel martial arts brawler. Under the hood, it's secretly a turn-based tactics game cosplaying as a Jackie Chan movie. Every encounter is a tiny diorama, a bridge with a shield guy and a rifleman, a bathhouse with brawlers and staff users, tight rooms full of goons just itching to smack you into a wall. You don't just mash your way through it. You plan it, rehearse it, then gamble everything on one clean run. Mechanically, here's how it works. Each node on the map is a single screen fight against a handful of enemies. You can jump straight in and throw hands, or you can enter Foresight mode. The screen darkens, time freezes, and you get to practice the fight with zero consequences. Die in Foresight, no problem. Try a different route. Kick the rushing guy into his body instead of blocking. Steal the spear and use it on the rifleman. You can do this infinite times. Only when you're happy with your plan do you press go on the real attempt, and that's the one that actually hits your health bar and your run. That's the core that every review agrees is brilliant. One outlet compares it to visualizing a bar fight while you're standing in line at a self-checkout, imagining all the ways you could judo your way out if things popped off. Another calls it Edge of Tomorrow for martial arts, where your failures are canon in your head, but the world only sees the one timeline where you got it right. It's a combat puzzle first and a brawler second, and Forestrike leans hard into that identity. Layered on top of this are the 5 masters you can train under. Each one is basically a class changing how you approach runs. One style is about using enemy movement against them, dodging so they crash into each other. Another leans into tight blocking and countering, turning incoming hits into openings. There's a lightning-focused style that lets you dart around and strike from behind. Later on, you unlock more unusual stuff like airborne launchers that turn you into a mid-air menace. Critics mostly like this variety. It's the main way Forestrike keeps runs fresh, shifting your default solution to a room based on what your toolkit looks like. But there's important friction here. You get techniques and relics as you progress, but permanent upgrades between runs are rare. 2 reviewers specifically call out the meta progression as undercooked. You're not steadily building a godlike you over time. You're mostly learning how to play better. If you want a Hades-style drip feed of new toys every few runs, Forestrike is stingier than that. The build craft is interesting. Each master has a big pool of potential techniques, and relics can warp how your resources work, but the game clearly expects you to improve as a player more than it wants to throw you big numbers. For some people that's exciting, for others it's going to feel like hitting a wall. The actual encounters, though, are where the game really shines. Enemies are designed like toys in a physics sandbox. Some carry weapons you can disarm and turn against them. Others throw projectiles that you can deflect into someone else. Some block, some do huge telegraph strikes that you dodge or sidestep to send them crashing into the crowd. On top of simply surviving optional challenge conditions, use only light attacks, beat the timer, push you to rethink your perfect plan for a little extra currency. It's very, what if every fight scene was a tiny puzzle box? And when you nail one in a single flowing sequence, it really does feel like you storyboarded a kung fu movie and then acted it out. Visually, everyone's on the same page. This thing looks great. The pixel art is chunky but expressive, with heavy use of color-coded cues to telegraph attacks, blocks, and resources. Backgrounds are exact what you want from wuxia-flavored action. Rural roads, creaky bridges, steamy bathhouses, dense city streets. The portraits between fights are more painterly and help sell the world beyond the tiny arenas. Paired with sharp sound design and a soundtrack that leans into that old-school martial arts vibe, it pulls off a strong identity without needing 4K particle spam. The story is sneakily better than you might expect from a small roguelite. On the surface, it's a familiar disciplined fighter overthrows corrupt power arc, but one reviewer in particular calls out how the narrative questions whether Yu is actually traveling or just meditating in the monastery, playing out endless futures in his mind. Masters comment on your progress, new rooms in the temple open up between runs, and the writing apparently shows a lot of restrained short, pointed lines instead of lore dumps. It's not some huge narrative epic, but for a game this focused on systems, people were pleasantly surprised that the story was doing some philosophical heavy lifting instead of just being wallpaper. Quick spoiler in 3, 2, 1. There's a late game twist called the reality run. Once you've completed a full run with each master, you unlock a mode where Foresight is disabled. No practice, no rewinds, just raw execution. Runs already take around 25-30 minutes when you're successful, so this is a big ask. One critic hated the idea at first. Why would you remove the game's coolest mechanic? But eventually came around because the story frames it as transcending your safety net, actually embodying everything you learned in all those practice runs. Others are probably going to see it as unnecessarily punishing, especially in a roguelite where RNG on upgrades can still nudge you into rough situations. Spoilers over, not everything lands. Several reviews mention that the map structure is very straightforward, with fewer surprising branches than some other roguelites. If you're hoping for wild event nodes, story branches, or radically different routes, this is more of a steady march to the capital than a sprawling journey. On the progression side, permanent upgrades are so rare that some players will just feel stuck, especially if they're not naturally drawn toward hardcore skill-based games. And while the PC version has a few minor performance hiccups, the bigger red flag is on Switch 2, where one reviewer reports frequent crashes to the home screen. Thankfully, the game saves between levels, so you don't lose runs, but it's still a bad vibe. A launch patch is supposed to help, but it's something to keep on your radar. So what's the veteran game verdict? Forestrike is a smart, tightly designed martial arts roguelite that absolutely nails its central idea. Previewing fights like a psychic stunt coordinator, then committing to one brutally unforgiving take. If you love the one more run loop, enjoy solving combat like a puzzle, and don't mind that your biggest power-up is your own brain getting better. This is absolutely worth your time, and honestly underpriced for the depth it offers. But if you need generous permanent progression, hate the idea of occasionally hitting, this room is just unwinnable with my current build, or get frustrated easily by strict timing, this goes from brilliant to exhausting pretty fast. If this kind of no BS breakdown is your thing, hitch a ride with Veteran Game and hit subscribe so we can keep dragging these weird, ambitious roguelites into the spotlight instead of just chasing the same 5 AAA releases. Drop a like if you've ever sat in a checkout line and quietly theory crafted how you'd win a John Wick hallway fight, because this game is basically that brainworm turned into a design document. I'll leave you with this. Forestrike's whole philosophy is that planning is a crutch, and eventually you have to step into the fight without a safety net. In games and in real life, do you actually buy that? Or do you think perfect practice should always be part of the game rather than something you're forced to give up?